The New Year honours 1955 appointments in many of the Commonwealth realms of Queen Elizabeth II to various orders and honours to reward and highlight good works by citizens of those countries. They were announced on the 1st of January 1955 to celebrate the year past and mark the beginning of 1955. United Kingdom. Barons Edgar Douglas Adrian, Esq. OM, President of the Royal Society, President of the British Association, Master of Trinity College, Cambridge. Sir William Fraser, C.B.E., Chairman, Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, Limited. Sir Arnold Bab Gridley, K.B.E.M.P., Member of Parliament for Stockport, 1935 to 1950, and for Stockport South since 1950. Chairman, Conservative and Unionist Members Committee, 1946 to 1951. For Political and Public Services. Privy Councillors Evelyn Nigel Chetwood Birch, Esq. O.B.E.M.P. Minister of Works since October 1954. Parliamentary Secretary, Ministry of Defence, 1952 to 1954. Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Air, 1951–1952. Member of Parliament for Flintshire, 1945 to 1950, and for West Flint since 1950. Knight Bachelor William Gordon Bennett, Esq. M.P. Member of Parliament for the Woodside Division of Glasgow since 1950. For Political and Public Services. David Arnold Scott Cairns, Esq. Q.C. Chairman, Monopolies and Restrictive Practices Commission. Wilfred Edward Le Gros Clark, Esq. M.D. F.R.C.S. Dr. Lees Professor of Anatomy, University of Oxford. William Robert Marshall Cockburn, Esq. Chief General Manager, The Chartered Bank of India, Australia and China. Arthur Colgate, Esq. M.P. Member of Parliament for the Wrekin Division, 1941 to 1945, and for the Burton Division since 1950. For Political and Public Services. Ivor Richard Cox, Esq. D.S.O. for Services as Managing Director, Metropolitan Vickers Electrical Company Limited. William Charles Crocker, Esq. M.C., lately President of the Law Society. Leybourne Stanley Patrick Davidson, Esq. M.D. F.R.C.P., Professor of Medicine, University of Edinburgh and President of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. Colonel Charles Vernon Fitton, O.B.E.M.C. For Political and Public Services in the North Riding of Yorkshire. Arthur Alexander Gemmell, Esq. M.C. T.D. M.D. F.R.C.S. President, Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. George Frederick Hammer, Esq. C.B.E. for Public Services in Wales. Lord Lieutenant of Montgomeryshire. Basil Lucas Kahano Enriques, Esq. C.B.E. J.P. for Services to Youth Welfare. Alderman Archer Hoare, C.B.E. for Political and Public Services in Middlesex. Oscar Rudolph Hobson, Esq. for Services to Journalism. City Editor of the News Chronicle. Ian MacDonald Horrobin, Esq. M.P. Member of Parliament for Central Southwark, 1931 to 1935, and for Oldham East since 1951. For Political and Public Services. Alderman Harold Walter Seymour Howard, Lord Mayor of London. Ronald Martin Howe, Esq. C. VOMC, Deputy Commissioner, Metropolitan Police Force. Colonel Francis James Gidlow Jackson, MC. T.D. for Political and Public Services in Manchester and Cheshire. Norris Vaughan Kenyon, Esq. J.P. for Political and Public Services in Paddington. Charles Stewart McFarlane, Esq. O.B.E. for Political Services in Scotland. Robert Reynolds McIntosh, ESQ.F. RCS, Nuffield Professor of Anaesthetics, University of Oxford. Robert Alexander MacLean, ESQ. For services to industry in Scotland. John Mann, ESQ. C. B.E. J.P. D.L. Convener, Lanarkshire County Council. Brigadier Frank Medlicott, C.B.E. MP, Member of Parliament for East Norfolk, 1939 to 1950, and for Central Norfolk since 1950. For political and public services, Philip Eric Milbourne, ESQ. C.M.G. Honorary Advisor on Shipping in Port to the Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation. Keith Anderson Hope Murray, ESQ. Chairman, University Grants Committee. John Ernest Neal, ESQ. Astor Professor of English History, University of London. Wilfred John Nedden, ESQ. C.B.E. Chief Industrial Commissioner, Ministry of Labour and National Service. Arthur Cyril Richmond, ESQ. C.B.E. Chairman of the Land Settlement Association and of the Federation of Agricultural Cooperatives in Great Britain and Ireland. Alfred Roberts, ESQ. C.B.E. J.P. General Secretary, National Association of Card, Blowing and Ringroom Operatives. Sidney Gordon Russell, ESQ. C.B.E. MC. Designer and Artist. Robert Donald Scott, ESQ. M.P. Member of Parliament for the Wansbeck Division, 1940 to 1945, and for Penrith and the Border since 1950. Joint Parliamentary Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, May to July, 1945. For political and public services, Leonard Sinclair, ESQ. Chairman and Managing Director, Esso Petroleum Company, Limited. Rear Admiral Matthew Sauce Slattery, C.B. Chairman and Managing Director, Short Brothers and Harland, Limited. Belfast. Henry Spurrier, ESQ. Managing Director, Leyland Motors, Limited. Oliver Graham Sutton, ESQ. C.B.E. Director of the Meteorological Office, Air Ministry. Walter Wharton-Tong, ESQ. For political and public services in Bolton, Colonel George Albert Wade, MC, J.P. For political and public services in Staffordshire, Robert Bernard Water, ESQ. C.B. Solicitor to the Board of Inland Revenue. Thomas Adam Wedspoon, ESQ. For political and public services in Angus. Edgar Leighton Bean, ESQ. C.M.G. Parliamentary Draftsman, State of South Australia. The Honourable Frank Tennyson Perry, M.B.E. A Member of the Legislative Council, State of South Australia. For public services, Thomas Sidney Chegwidden, ESQ. C.B.C. VO, Chairman of the Interim Public Service Commission, Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. For public services, James Grieg Shearer, ESQ. Indian Civil Service, formerly a Queen Judge of the High Court of Judicature at Patna. Nicholas Bayard Dell, ESQ. C.B.E. For public services in Bermuda. Joseph Transvaal Gilbert, ESQ. C.B.E. QC. Chief Justice, Bermuda. Eric Hallinan, ESQ. Chief Justice, Cyprus. Eldred Frederick Hitchcock, ESQ. C.B.E. For public services in Tanganyika. Kabina Aku Corsa, ESQ. C.B.E. Queen Judge, Gold Coast. Paul George Pavlides, ESQ. C.B.E. For public services in Cyprus. Order of the Bath Knights Grand Cross Sir John Primate Redcliffe Maud, K. C.B.E. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Fuel and Power. Knights Commander Vice Admiral Sir John Arthur Simmons Eccles, K. CVO, C.B.E. Vice Admiral Frank Trowbridge Mason, C.B. Lieutenant General Sir Lashmar Gordon Whistler, K.B.E. C.B.D. S.O. Late Infantry. Major General Sir Thomas John Willoughby Winterton, K.C.M.G., C.B.C., B.E. Late Infantry. Air Marshal Sir Harry Broadhurst, K.B.E. C.B.D., S.O.D., F.C.A., F.C. Royal Air Force. Sir Herbert Britton, K.B.E. C.B. Second Secretary, H.M. Treasury. Edward Abdy Fellows, ESQ, C.B.C., M.G., M.C. Clerk of the House of Commons. Lieutenant Colonel the Right Honourable Sir Michael Edward Dean, K.C.V.O. C.B. Private Secretary to the Queen. Companions Order of St. Michael and St. George. Knight Grand Cross His Highness the Right Honourable Aga Sultan Muhammad Shah Aga Khan, CSI, CIE, CV.O. The Honourable Sir Evelyn Baring, K.C.M.G., K.C.V.O. Governor and Commander-in-Chief, Kenya. Sir Roger Mellomakins, K.C.B., K.C.M.G., Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Washington. Knight Commander the Honourable Geoffrey Cocken Gibbs, C.M.G., Chairman of the Advisory Council, Export Credits Guarantee Department. Admiral Sir Martin Eric Dunbar Nasmyth, V.C.K., C.B.D.L., lately Vice-Chairman, Imperial War Graves Commission. The Right Honourable Sir Ronald Hibbert Cross B.T., K.C.V.O. Governor of the State of Tasmania. Lieutenant General Sir John Dudley Laverack, K.C.V.O. K.B.E. C.B.C. M.G.D. S.O. Governor of the State of Queensland. The Honourable Sir Robert Clarkson Treadgold, C.M.G., Chief Justice of Southern Rhodesia, and Acting Governor of the colony on several occasions. Edward Betham Beetham, ESQ, C.M.G., C.V.O.O., B.E. Governor and Commander-in-Chief, Windward Islands. The Right Honourable Thomas Daniel, Earl of Ranfurly, Governor and Commander-in-Chief, Bahamas. Patrick Murenison, ESQ, C.M.G., Governor and Commander-in-Chief, British Honduras. Sir Brian Evers Sharwood Smith, K.B.E. C.M.G., E.D., Governor, Northern Region, Nigeria. The Honourable Robert Morris Ayers Hankey, C.M.G., Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Stockholm. Geoffrey Wedgwood Harrison, ESQ, C.M.G., an Assistant Under-Secretary of State in the Foreign Office. Reginald Keith Jobson, ESQ, C.M.G., O.B.E., Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Bogotá. Charles Norman Sterling, ESQ, C.M.G., Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Lisbon. Companion Royal Victorian Order. Knights Commanders the Right Reverend Eric Knightley Chetwood Hamilton. Sir Gerald Festus Scully. Commanders Captain James Stephen Dalglish, Royal Navy. Albert Norman Harrison, ESQ, O. B.E. Joseph Graham Humble, ESQ, M. RCS, L. RC, P. Captain Arthur Cecil Josmelin. Alan MacLeod, ESQ, F. DSR, CS, Kenneth Roy Eldon Taylor, ESQ. Members, 4th and 5th Classes Order of the British Empire. Companions of Honour Captain the Right Honourable Harry Frederick Humphrey Cruikshank, M.P., Lord Privy Seal since 1952 and Leader of the House of Commons since 1951. Minister of Health, 1951–1952, Postmaster General, 1943–1945, Financial Secretary to the Treasury, 1939–1943. Member of Parliament for Gainsborough since 1924. The Reverend Hugh Martin, for services to the National Free Church Federal Council and to the British Council of Churches. New Zealand. Knight Bachelor the Honourable George Panton Finlay, Senior Queen Judge of the Supreme Court. Order of St. Michael and St. George. Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Leslie Knox Munro, Her Majesty's New Zealand Ambassador to the United States of America. Order of the British Empire. Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Major General William Henry Cunningham CBEDSOVD, Crown Prosecutor in Wellington, for services to law. Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Ernest Headley Roy Green, Chief Engineer, Post and Telegraph Department. Robert Alexander Crookston Laidlaw MBE of Auckland, for social welfare and philanthropic services. Stanley Logan Patterson, Senior Stipendiary Magistrate. Military Division Captain Frank Edward Taylor DSCVRD, Royal New Zealand Naval Volunteer Reserve. Officer of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division William David Campbell of Timaru, for services to law, education and journalism. Mason Te Rama Apakura Jury, leading chief of the Rangitane tribe, for services to the Maori people. Frank William Gilligan, headmaster of the Wanganui Collegiate School, for services to education. Charles Kirkpatrick Grierson, president of the New Zealand Institute of Surveyors. Miss Marie Emma Ensher Little, matron of the Sunnyside Mental Hospital, Christchurch. John Murray JP of Wellington, for patriotic and social welfare services, particularly in connection with the Disabled Servicemen's Rehabilitation League. George John Park of Auckland, for services to education and in connection with the work of the Crippled Children's Society. Arthur Gentry Pitts LRCPF RCS, a medical practitioner at Waimate, for services to the community. Henry Charles Whittle of Ashburton, for services to local government. Military Division Acting Commander John David KVRD, Royal New Zealand Navy. Lieutenant Colonel William Denzel Philp DSO Ed, Royal New Zealand Artillery Territorial Force. Squadron Leader Cecil David Melville Kingsford, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Member of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Mrs. Susan Amy Barneycoat of Wellington, for services to the community, especially in connection with women's organisations. John Broughton of Christchurch, for social welfare services. Mrs. Jenny Henderson Campbell of Auckland, for social welfare services. Evelyn Sutherland Karen JP, Commissioner of the Warkworth Town Board, for services to the community. John Ira Fraser, for services to local government in the Maniatoto County. Sydney George of Auckland, for services to the Boys Brigade. Robert Davis Gerard of Willenhall, for services to the community, in particular for his work as General Secretary of the National Union of Log and Metal Workers, as a county magistrate, a county councillor, and for his work on the creation of Willenhall Comprehensive School. Albert Percy Greenfield JP of Dunedin, for social welfare services. Edgar Harding of Woodville, for services to the community, especially in connection with local government and the dairy industry. James David Howard, Chairman of the Management Committee of the Wellington Boys Institute. Frederick Ainsworth Hudson JP of Leven, for services to local government. Mrs. Maud Marion Kelly of Nelson, for social welfare services. Thomas Daniel Lenny of Christchurch, for services to horticulture. Mrs. Imate Toro Atangi Arikio Tene, for services to the Maori people in Hawke's Bay, especially in the field of women's welfare. Arthur Henry Sive Wright, Chairman of the Hawke's Bay Education Board. Henry Joseph Stace, for services to local government and to agriculture in Marlborough. William Stapleton, Curator of the Botanical Gardens in Invercargill, for services to horticulture. Henry Sweeney J.P. of Christchurch, for social welfare services. Mrs. Mabel Sinclair Walden of Riverton, for social welfare services. Mrs. Constance Lillian Weston, for services to the community in New Plymouth. Ernest Summers Wilson, of Dunedin, for services to the community in connection with charitable and patriotic organisations. Military Division Lieutenant Arthur Beaver Wilkinson, Royal New Zealand Navy. The Reverend Francis John Green, Chaplain, Royal New Zealand Chaplains Department. Major Leslie Rexnald Musgrave, New Zealand Regiment. Captain Hugh Bannatyne Fraser Titler, Royal New Zealand Infantry, Territorial Force. Warrant Officer Class 1 Carl Alexander Walter, Royal New Zealand Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Flight Lieutenant Noel Alexander Spring Rice, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Warrant Officer Leslie William Thompson, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Warrant Officer Clifford Huia Perrett, Royal New Zealand Air Force. British Empire Medal Military Division Petty Officer Edward Morris Hancock, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Engine Room Artificer James Nathan Rothwell, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Petty Officer Mervyn Leslie St. Clair, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Petty Officer Claude Wilfred Mason Riseborough, Royal New Zealand Navy. Staff Sergeant Joseph Matthew Lowe, Royal New Zealand Signals. Territorial Force. Flight Sergeant James Hugh Watts, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Sergeant William Harrison Stannerland, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Air Force Cross Flight Lieutenant Raymond Darth Mackinder, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Air Force Medal Sergeant Ivan Noel Moran, Royal New Zealand Air Force.